A very good evening. You're watching News 9 Facebook Live with me, Adarsh Vepachedu. Now, the United States government is running out of money and fast. So much so that the U.S. Senate passed a bill to avert a virtual shutdown and fund the government up until the 11th of December this year. So how does America plan to make its money quickly? Well, the short answer is through us Indians. Now, this bill that I was just mentioning enables United States Immigration Agency to quickly process more visa categories, including employment authorization documents and certain green card categories. Now, part of this very bill allows the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, or the USCIS, to charge more for premium processing of visas and expands it to also cover more categories in it. To tell us more about what this means for the United States and more importantly for India, we have with us Sanket Yanagi, who happens to be a Supreme Court advocate and also an immigration consultant, joining us over the phone line. Many thanks, sir, for speaking to us. My first question, is this move on expected lines, and is it in the end because of the kind of toll that the pandemic has taken in terms of dwindling visa fees for the United States?
So, Mr. Adarsh, now it enables its immigration agencies to quickly process more visa categories, including employment authorization documents and certain green card categories as well. And the part of this bill could be considered as an emergency stopgap of USCIS Stabilization Act, which allows United States Citizenship and Immigration Services to charge more for the premium processing of the visas and expands it to cover more categories than the previous situation.
Okay.
And it solely it increases the fee. It has got a categorization on the basis of the fee income, and also has the bailout to allow to continue to operate following the slump of in visa fees on account of COVID-19 pandemic. This is in one way earning more revenue to the immigration agencies and to avoid furlough of all its employees who are already in sufferance.
Okay.
And in addition to the same, this will, in a way, the currently situation where the processing of employment documents for H-4 visa holders, spouse of H-1B visa holders, can also, which is now taking up for 6 months. During this time, they can also work in the United States. That is one added advantage for them.
Okay.
And the ability to apply for the premium processing would normally bring down the processing time to under 30 days than the previous, which used to happen for 6 months.
Okay.
Though the exact fees have not been determined by the USCIS, and it would be most probably believed that it would be less than $1,500, and there is a flexibility as to how it can use the income also later subsequently. So on the basis of the development of the situation or the conditions which are prevailing under the pandemic.
So, Mr. Sanket, this is, in a sense, can we call this a one-off? It's only during a circumstance such as the pandemic where the United States does this, or is this, again, something that is heard of usually?
No, it was expected because of the pandemic.
Okay.
And it was also burden on the immigration agencies there. And since they were running out of the revenue, and this was much expected from the department, and U.S. Senate has so considered it very seriously and passed a bill. And insofar as EB1C category, which applies to the multinational executives, this bill allows for expanding premium processing to green cards.
Okay.
And for several applicants from India, more particularly, who are in U.S. on L1 visa would also benefit out of this inclusion.
All right. But Mr. Sanket, there is another final rule as well, which proposed an increase in visa fees from October 2nd, that is today. And it was also blocked by a U.S. federal court. Bottom line, are we looking at a much expensive visa fee from here on?
Correct. That is much expected because of the pandemic and the less revenue, which is already in sufferance. And keeping that in mind, the court has already considered the sufferance of the students, sufferance of the employees or the immigrants who are already there in U.S. So now the court has already stepped in and it is restricting, and it has already granted an interim order to that extent, the rights of immigrants or those who are applying for the visa or for processing are still under consideration by the court.
Okay.
And the federal court, in most probability, may order in favor of those who are at preference, may not be in favor of the U.S. government. That is how it is expected to be.
Mr. Sanket, how do you see this new bill really impacting the prospects of Indians, especially those wanting to continue their studies in the United States? We're talking about the Indian youth, the Indian students. Yes, there are a bunch of provisions that we're talking about, but it's all coming at a huge price. So you could speak to us about how this move will impact the number of Indians going to the United States and how it really impacts the Indian diaspora as well.
Firstly, the government is looking at it only from its revenue point,
Correct.
but it is not considering the situation of the Indian students
Correct.
or those students from the other countries. And at the pandemic more particularly, it is a burden on them, and it has to be considered compassionately, otherwise the entire rationale is not otherwise.
Okay.
So that being the situation, the court has already stepped into, and this is something unexpected from the U.S. government, and it's a burden on the students, and the future prospect of the students or the flow of the students to U.S., especially from India, would get affected.
Oh yes.
And for the universities also get affected, and pursuing a higher education in U.S. Would become quite difficult now onwards, unless it is not reviewed or not considered appropriately either by the government or by the court. And more so, the Students' Association at the university have already raised their objections to this.
Okay.
In other ways, it is discouraging the education system as a whole.
But
And
there's
it
not,
would again...
can we, Mr. Sanket, can we say that there's not much that the United States can also do at this point in time? You were just mentioning as to how it's the pandemic, so it was on expected lines, and it is a little obvious that the United States would be resorting to such means.
It was not much expected from U.S., but the Senate, which is under the control of the government, most probably here, which is led by the majority or belonging to the Trump government. So this bill, though, seems to be appropriate for the Senate, but it is not convenient for the existing situation, not comfortable to the students. And presently, those who are already settled in U.S., it is adding much more pain than that of the pandemic.
Right, right.
They are already at the verge of losing employments, and adding to this would be considered as an additional burden on their livelihood.
Oh yes, indeed. Well, many thanks, Mr. Sanket, for joining us and for explaining to us the rationale behind the United States move as to how they've gone ahead and, if I can say, hiked the visa processing fee. It is going to cost a little more, in fact, a lot more than what it used to cost up until now. But yes, you can get your visa, the H-1B visa and several other visas processed a little faster. So you're getting that, but it is all coming at a price. And Sanket Yanagi also telling us as to how one must understand the rationale, the reasoning behind this very move. It's the United States coffers that are really running dry, and it is because of that that they're resorting to something like this to rake up some moolah at the earliest. If you like the information that we've shared with you this evening, do not forget to like, share and subscribe to News9 on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. Many thanks for joining us.